Hey guys, welcome back to Storytime with Mr. Isaiah. We are reading Sink or Swim, and today we're starting on chapter 12. So if you have already missed some of those, make sure you go back and catch up before you start off today. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications so you don't miss any stories, and be sure to say hey, what's up in the comments. I love to hear from you. Let's get started with chapter 12. A week later, Woody and I were on the train again, heading to Michigan of all places, though not back to boot camp. Instead, we were going to Bay City, where a company called the Defoe Boat and Motor Works was building patrol crafts and had just finished the one we would be on. Me as a sonar operator and signalman, and Woody in the engine room, as they called a snipe, which is about the lowest level engine room job there is. The officers had already prepared our PC, so pretty much as soon as we got there on a cold day in late spring, the 60 of us that made up the crew shouldered our sea bags and marched up the gangplank and on board for our Shakedown Cruise. The chief petty officer, whose last name was Kerr, and who didn't seem to have a first name, was a tall, wiry guy with a jaw that looked like it had been chiseled out of stone. He was the one who greeted us by barking orders at us to stow our gear first thing. He called us deck apes and said we'd better move it, making me think he'd spent some time drilling recruits at boot camp. But there wasn't time to ask him, not that I was dumb enough that I ever would, of course. As we made our way below decks to the crew's quarters in the forecastle, which was the forward part of the ship just behind the head, and the worst place of all because that was where the ship would rise and fall most in rough water. We wedged our gear into lockers that were about half the size we needed, then made up our bunks, slipping fart sacks over mattresses, adding on folded blankets, and then doing what they called tricing up the bunks to the walls in the up position using chains at the foot and the head of each bed. They said we had to do this to make more room in the narrow galley, but really it was to keep guys from sneaking naps on their bunks when they were supposed to be on duty. Because I was the lowest ranking seaman, I got last pick of the bunks. Mine was far forward as you could go in the crew's quarters, which I knew would make a bad situation even worse when I tried to sleep in the stormy ocean. Plus, I'd get the stench from the head. Plus, they made me take the top bunk, the third one up, which was almost higher than I could climb. Before I could try to climb up on my own, somebody grabbed me from behind and without saying a word threw me onto the bunk. I slammed against the wall and yelped, and the rest of the crew laughed. I heard a familiar laugh, deep and loud, and knew right away who it was. "Strobe," I shouted, "what are you doing here?" "They needed some muscle around those depth chargers," he said, "and they figured I was the guy, even if I didn't get to go to your little submarine school." I practically hugged him and then said, "Want me to throw you up on your bunk next?" Strobe tipped his head back and roared, "I still don't know how you escaped from kindergarten and made it into the Navy, but glad to see you, Danny." That broke the ice with the other guys down there, with us making up their bunks, and everybody started introducing themselves to everybody else. I couldn't believe I hadn't spotted Strobe before when we were first coming on board the ship. As big as he was, I guess I'd just been too excited and nervous about getting my assignment and getting out on the Atlantic Ocean and going after those U-boats. Woody, meanwhile, had followed the chief motor machinist mate, another big guy with red hair, who Woody later told me the other motor machinist and Snipes called Big Carrot. All the engine crew slept where they worked, closer to the back of the ship, in a compartment just off the engine room, so at least the rough water wouldn't be as much of a problem, even if the stink of 12 bodies crammed back there coupled with the grease and fumes from the engine, made it hard to breathe. Or to want to breathe. Boy, was he ever surprised to see Strobe when the Snipes came back up on deck. They pounded on each other's backs so hard that they probably left big bruises. They all stopped when Chief Kerr ordered us to stand at attention, adding at least a dozen cuss words to the order, which seemed to be just how he talked. Some of them actually made me turn red in the face to hear them, but I did what he said, just like everybody else. We were waiting for Lieutenant Walter Tollery to address the crew. He kept us waiting for a really long time. Half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and then finally he showed, standing on the bridge, staring down on us, still at attention, but not happy about it. We weren't supposed to look around, but it was hard not to check him out. What he looked like and all. He was young, maybe in his mid-20s, and clean-shaven, and must have just joined the Navy right out of college, which turned out to be the case. Chief Kerr was what they called a Navy lifer. He'd been in the service since the Great War, but Lieutenant Talley had just taken a bunch of officers' classes along with training in anti-submarine warfare at the Subchaser Training Center. He was the one who would be captain of our ship, PC-450, which didn't have a name because they told us in the Donald Duck Navy the ships were too small to deserve one. Lieutenant Talley nodded a few times as if we were counting heads. Then he took a deep breath in and seemed to hold it. I realized I was also holding my breath, and so were some of the guys around me. When Lieutenant Talley finally breathed out, we did too. "Welcome aboard, men," he said, in a stilted voice. "This is your new home. I can't tell you for how long. That depends on how long the war goes on. But anyway, welcome." He paused as if he was gathering himself for whatever else he had to say, but instead, he just said, "Follow orders, be where you're supposed to be at all times, do your part to defeat the enemy, take care of your fellow sailors, no exceptions." And then he said, "Dismissed." 2 weeks later, after our Shakedown Cruise on Lake Huron, it was time for our first mission, escorting a convoy of cargo ships out on the York Harbor. We got there on an evening in late May, all hands on deck to marvel at the spectacular city lit up. I could see everything, the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island and the Empire State Building, all those famous places I'd heard about but didn't ever think I'd see. "You think we'll get to go on shore?" Woody asked Strobe and me, joining us to lean on the railing. I couldn't stop staring. "I bet there's all kinds of girls just waiting to go out on a date with a bunch of sailors like us," he added. "You know, Navy heroes and everything." Strobe laughed his big laugh. "I don't remember us doing anything heroic just yet," he said. "I ain't never seen so many lights in my whole life," Woody said, adding a whistle of amazement. "And you couldn't pay me enough money to go up in them tall buildings they got over there. I'd get scared of the heights just going up the stairs." "They got elevators, you know," Strobe said, as if he had spent his life in a big city instead of some small town in Ohio. "Same thing," Woody said. Chief Kerr joined us then. "Stupid idiots," he swore. That caught me by surprise. "Sorry, Chief," I stammered. We just haven't ever seen anything like this before. I'm not talking about you sailors, Chief said. I'm talking about the stupid idiots who still won't order them to black out the lights in these cities at night as if a demount is enough. It's still a blazing bullseye. You don't think there's U-boats out there right now with the same view as us, probably smiling away, sizing up targets. Ships coming in here, backlit by all those city lights. Heck, they could take out one or two of those buildings if they had a mind to. I looked around nervously at the dark water surrounding us, kicking myself for not already having thought about what the chief said. This was the war, and there we were talking about riding in elevators in New York City and going on short leave and girls. Back to your stations, Chief said. You've seen your New York, or all of it you're going to see this time around. Aye, aye, Chief, we said at the same time. It wasn't our watch yet, but we knew better than to say that, and instead we scattered to either hit our bunks and catch some shut-eye, or go down to the galley or somewhere else to hide. On the way, I took a last look around. First inland at New York Harbor, and then the dangerous lights in the city, and then behind us where there was a fleet of cargo ships ready to begin their voyages, and beyond, those were several Navy destroyers and PCs that would be joining us when we set out for Key West in a couple of days. I hoped they were being vigilant, the way that instructor had told us back in the pretend ship at basic training. The way we were also going to have to be vigilant from now on if we were going to protect the merchant ships on our convoy and ourselves from the U-boats lurking out there in the dark Atlantic, just waiting for an opportunity to sink us all. Chapter 13. This is kind of a hard book to read. It uses a lot of terms from ships and submarines and boats and in terms that we don't use in our daily lives every day. So when you're seeing new words, it's kind of hard. I'm pointing that out not to make excuses for me stuttering and stopping my reading so much, but for you guys also to understand that when you're reading and you get tripped up on words, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? Again, make sure you subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss a thing. Make sure and leave me a comment to let me know what you think about the story, and stay safe, be good, behave, be wise, be smart, wash your hands often, mind your parents, don't fight with your brothers and sisters, just be a good champion. I love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.